What if I told you that the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution does not guarantee you the right to represent yourself in a trial? This is a very common argument in the sovereign citizen movement, that you are somehow miraculously you are legally allowed to represent yourself. The Sixth Amendment does not expressly guarantee this. However, there is a follow-up ruling by the Supreme Court called Ferretta versus California, which says that this is actually implied within the Sixth Amendment. So, with that said, though, because it was said within Ferretta and that is not considered an express guarantee of the U.S. Constitution, one does have to go through what is called a Ferretta hearing in order to be able to exercise this implied privilege. Now, the reason why sovereign citizens insist on representing themselves in court, I believe, is a complex issue. They are told by the sovereign citizen gurus that accepting a public defender is establishing a contract with the state, which means that you are now, which in turn establishes jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is not established by a court-appointed attorney. Jurisdiction is established by the laws of the state and a privilege afforded by another amendment called the 10th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, which is the States' Rights Amendment, which allows states to enforce laws that are not necessarily expressly granted by the Constitution to the federal government. The 10th Amendment is where that comes from, and jurisdiction is established through laws that are established under the 10th Amendment. Now, the real reason why I believe that these gurus happen to insist on their customers not accepting a court-appointed attorney is actually a little bit more dark than that. At the end of the day, it's easier for the self-appointed gurus to avoid accountability for selling this false and illegal information to their victims. It's a lot more difficult for these people to hold these gurus, self-appointed gurus, accountable if they're in prison. So these gurus want their customers to be imprisoned. They do not want them to succeed, and they do not want them to win. So therefore they are told not to accept a court-appointed attorney because it improves their chances of actually getting off on the court charges. These gurus want their customers in prison. There's no other way to put it. They want them in jail or prison or whatever, because they cannot be held accountable for selling lies and for selling falsehoods and, honestly, encouraging their so-called customers to break the law. They cannot be held accountable when those people are in jail or in prison. So there it is, guys. The Sixth Amendment does not guarantee you the right to represent yourself. It does expressly guarantee you the right to be represented. And in the case of the Sixth Amendment, it does expressly give you the right to be appointed court-appointed counsel at no charge to you and paid for by the state or local jurisdiction. That right you do have, to be appointed by legal counsel. Because the framers of the Constitution wrote the Sixth Amendment fully aware of the risks that people without representation do face in a potential unfair prosecution, because they're not legally represented by somebody who knows the ins and outs of statutory or constitutional law. And therefore they establish the right to be represented by legal counsel in a court of law. Hence the Sixth Amendment. But it does not give one the right to do it themselves. And a Feretta hearing establishes that as an implied right. Now, what the Feretta hearing does is it allows the judge to analyze somebody's capability to represent themselves in a legal matter or in a prosecution against a criminal allegation. That's what the Feretta hearing is for. It allows the court to determine how capable the accused individual is of conducting their own successful defense. I will say right now that conducting your own self-defense is very much a fool's errand. Abraham Lincoln once put it correctly that an attorney who represents himself has a fool for a client. If you self-represent in a criminal matter, you are at a heavy disadvantage because you're up against a prosecutor who has had years and years and years of legal